It's my privilege to introduce my friend Bernie Yablon. Bernie is a very long-time member of Temple Beth Shalom. How long, Bernie? About?
Oh, when Natalie was president.
When Natalie was president, way long ago, around the time of George Washington. He often attends Friday and Saturday. And that's how I met Bernie. Years ago, Ed and I sat with the Furshines, Hill and Sylvia, and Bernie also did, because he was Sylvia's friend also and neighbor. He lives like 2 doors from where Sylvia and Hill lived. So, but we had casual conversation, and one day Bernie told me some of his war stories, which I thought were the funniest war stories I'd ever heard, a different view of World War II. And since then, I've heard his stories from the Great Depression, because I was born around the end of the Depression, and I imagine some of you were too. And to me, that's just history in the history books, but Bernie lived it. So he's going to share both the war stories and the Depression stories, and maybe a little more if there is time. So we now have the pleasure of hearing from Bernie Yablon. Bernie.
Thank you. Okay. About a week and a half ago, Arlene asked me if I was ready for my talk, and I says, "What's to get ready for? I know what happened, and I know when it happened, so I'll just get up and talk." She says, "Oh no, you can't do that. You have to make an outline of what you want to say, and then say it and time yourself." So basically, I break down my life, I would say, in 3 parts: pre-war, war, and post-war. So I wrote out an outline, and then I timed myself. I started to talk, and I says, "Oh my God, I didn't get through pre-war, and it's an hour is gone already." So, I wrote it out, but I'm going to leave out an awful lot of what I could say that I think is interesting. But anyway, the interesting part, I think, would have to start with my parents. They were born in a town called Łomża, Poland, and it's spelled with an L, but after all, what do the Poles know about reading English? So anyway, it's called Łomża. Now, when my father was about 16 years old, he was a powerful kid, and he was a very strong swimmer. And he was swimming at a river, and there were people on the bank hollering, "Help, save her, save her." So he took a walk. He saw that there was a woman in the middle of the stream being pulled by the current, and she couldn't swim. So he dove in, swam to her. Her hair was floating on the water. He wrapped her hair in his hand, turned her over on her back, and he pulled her out. It just so happened that she was governess to the Tsar's children. And the people on the bank were all part of the royal court and noble people. So they told the Tsar what happened, and they said, "You should give the boy a medal, because he really, he was a hero." So the Tsar sent his engineers and surveyors out to the area, and they measured the currents, and they get the distances and so forth, and they came back and told him, yes, he was a hero, because the currents were strong, and she could have drowned. But the Tsar was reluctant to give him a medal because he was Jewish. After a while, he did relent, and he presented my father with a silver medal about 2 inches in diameter, and it had his face on it. And that medal now was given to my nephew in Los Angeles for his bar mitzvah. And my father's family were all a bunch of builders and carpenters. And as a matter of fact, my grandfather was the only Jew permitted to work in the church. They used to say that my grandfather was a very good carpenter, but my father has him beat. And well, he always was always able to get work without any problem. Then they heard that the streets in America are paved with gold. So in 1921, my father came to the United States. He left my mother and her two children in Lumsher. And in 1923, he brought them to the United States. I guess they must have really missed each other because 9 months later I was born. Then, well, he was successful as a carpenter, and he went into business with another man. And then the Depression came along, and there was no more work. It was hard to find work, and they had to lose their business. A friend told him that in Valhalla, New York, they were building homes. So he went up there, got a job building to build the houses, and we moved up to Valhalla. After that work ended, he heard about more work in Peekskill, New York, and so we moved to Peekskill. When that work ended, we moved back to the Bronx. Well, we made a lot of new friends, and they used to call us the Three Peakies for Peekskill. I was Peaky Jr. My brother in the middle, his name was Chaim, and he didn't like that because in England they used to call him Jaime, and it had some anti-Semitic intonations, so he didn't like being called Jaime, and Peaky was his name for the rest of his life. Some people never knew he had a real name. And my brother Artie, well, I call him Artie, he was elemental, but he also had a lot of names. When my mother went to put him into school, she said, is the Alta. So they named him Alta, and that was his name for school. And, well, he's had a lot of names since then, but I've always called him Artie. And from now on, when I speak of him, I'll call him Artie, and the other one I'll call Peaky. Then a year and a half later, my sister Ida was born, and then 6 years later, my brother Gil was born. That rounds out the family. Anyway, we got into the Depression, and when we came back to the Bronx, it was hard for my father to get work, and it ate him up very badly. And he wound up having a nervous breakdown. He was getting very erratic. So we called the police, and they came up and he started to fight with the police. So they put him into a straitjacket, and they took him away, and he was in a hospital. Now, my mother's brother was a rabbi, and he taught in the yeshiva down on East Broadway in Manhattan. But in his apartment house, he took one bedroom and made it into a school, and he taught Hebrew and everything in his house, and I used to go to his house to learn my Hebrew. But my father was in a hospital. The time came for me to be bar mitzvahed. I was never bar mitzvahed then. Well, my father came out of the hospital, and he was able to go to work, and well, he was a very good carpenter. He was always foreman on any job he was at. And I had a cousin who married a businessman, and he was forming a new company called Decorative Displays. And what they did, they made window displays. The biggest client was Adam Hatz, and they made the display. My father made the original samples, and he set up the carpentry shop and the offices and everything. And well, when we were in Peekskill, my father used to take me on Saturdays. He used to take me to the jobs with him because it was assumed that I was going to become a carpenter, so he started to teach me. He would give me some wood and a saw, a hammer, and nails. And he would let me sit on the side, and he'd tell me to hammer the nails and cut the wood, so I could get used to it. He showed me that you had to do the work from the shoulders, not tap, And his favorite saying was, "Where do you hit the nails?" And most of the times he would say, "In the wood." He says, "Oh no, you have to hit the nail on the head. You have to look at the head when you hit the nail. Don't look at the wood." Anyway, that was one of his favorite things. When he went to work for decorative displays, he set up a whole factory with all the woodworking machines, and he used to take me down on Saturdays, and he showed me how to make the jigs so that the items that they were selling, they could be mass-produced. And I learned how to make these jigs so that they could put everything together. And he used to say, you could use all of the machines except the router. That was the machine that made moldings. He says, the router sings. You got to listen to it sing. It says, "I want your fingers, I want your fingers." And then, he got fired. He had an argument with either my cousin or his partner, and he got fired. But then there was a man he knew who purchased some property out on Riverhead, Long Island, right off the Atlantic Ocean, and wanted to put up a bunch of bungalows on that property. So he contracted with my father to furnish the labor, and he would furnish all the materials and have it shipped to the site to be used. And they went from the Bronx to Riverhead in my brother's car, my brother Artie's car. Now, Artie always had a car. He used to buy them from like $25 to $50 used cars. But in those days, new cars were selling for $600, $800. So that wasn't a crazy price. Anyway, they went out and they started to build. It was my two brothers, my father, and they hired another carpenter to work with them. On the day before Christmas in 1940, I was off from school, so they took me with them. They put me to work nailing down the shingles on one of the bungalows. And after we finished the day, we went to get into Artie's car, and then we started, and he got a flat on his left rear tire. So we all got out, we changed the tire, and my father was putting a hubcap on. All of a sudden, he wasn't there. A car came along and hit him and dragged him, must have been about 50 yards down. And they had call stations on the lamppost there, so we called for the police, and they came and they got an ambulance. And my father lived about 2 weeks after that, and he developed pneumonia, and that's what killed him. At that time, I was in high school. I was in the honor classes, but I decided I had to go to work after school. I had, there was no money coming in. Well, my two brothers were working, but still we needed more. So I was going out for the football team, and I couldn't play after school anymore, and so I had to leave that. I also was a gymnast, and I stayed with that, and when I graduated, I got my letter for gymnastics. My grades, when I gone to work after school, my grades fell down because I couldn't do my homework, and they took me out of the honors classes and put me into the regular classes. Anyway, about that time, I started to get interested in dancing. They, at the public schools, they had, every Saturday, they would take the gymnasium, turn it into a dance floor, charged a nickel or a dime. I used to go dancing. I said, so where else could you meet a stranger, take her in your arms and hug her and dance? So, and then some of the dances lasted a long time. So it was a bonus. Anyway, I got to be a pretty good dancer. I used to do the Lindy Hop, which is really swing or jitterbug. And that was the dance at the time. Anytime you look at movies, that's all they do. All the soldiers ever did was jitterbugging. And I met a girl, and we fell in love, and we decided, we planned that I would graduate and get a job as a carpenter, and we would get married. But the Japanese had different plans for us. They bombed Pearl Harbor, and in those days, the United States was already mobilizing. They had a draft, started I think in 1939. And at 17, we had to register for the draft, and after 18, they would call us in. So I graduated from high school and then turned 18. And like in November of 1942, Bernie, come on, we want you. You know that, we want Uncle Sam, we want you. So anyway, they got me. And my first my first stop was at Fort Dix, New Jersey. That was the reception center. They gave us uniforms. They gave us loads of shots. They gave us haircuts, taught us how to peel potatoes, and they gave us a lot of IQ tests. And then they had questionnaires about your life, and in the questionnaire they asked if we supported anyone, and I put down my mother and my two siblings, and the pay wasn't bad. It was pretty good. It was $21 a day, once a month. So after they took out the allotment from my mother, and we also everybody had to take out a $10,000 life insurance policy, and premiums came from our pay. So by the time they finished with me, I should say, I was getting about $10 a month. Hey, big spender, spend a little time with me. But anyway, we really didn't need money because, after all, they were giving us our clothes, our food, our overhead, and for entertainment, they gave us the USOs. So what do we need money for? Anyway, I finished with Fort Dix, and they put me into the Air Corps. They sent me to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and that was the basic training for the Air Corps. They took over all those big hotels along the boardwalk and the rooming houses on the side streets, and that's where they bunked us. For our food, we used to march to the hotels into their ballrooms and get that was our mess halls. We used to march up and down the boardwalk. You have to troop after troop after troop, going each way, and marching to the songs. We was all the rah-rah songs, and they also took us out to the firing range, and we got they taught us how to use the armaments. And on a rifle, I scored a 157, which was marksman, and 160 was a sharpshooter. So it didn't matter because I never had to fire anything. Anyway, from Atlantic City, they assigned me to the Signal Corps and sent me to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. That was the Bush Laboratory, not Bush, it was, heck. Anyway, it was Signal Corps, and they made me, and they had me go to school to become an aircraft radio repairman. Now when I got to Fort Monmouth, we could start to get 3-day passes, and used to hitchhike to the Bronx. Now in those days, whoever had a car was usually a civilian, and they were self-conscious about it, and you didn't get 2-3 cars past you before somebody would stop and pick you up. And they even sometimes on the way, they'd pass a Roadhouse restaurant, and they would even say, come on, let's go, and they'd buy us food, whatever, you know. Well, a lot of times I didn't go right to the Bronx. Instead, I stopped off at Newark, went to the USO there, and you know, met people and danced. And for overnight, I went to the YMCA, and for a quarter or a half a dollar, we used to get a clean bed to sleep on. Next morning, I would continue to the Bronx. One time, we had to go on bivouac. Now, bivouac is simulated war games. So we marched to the woods where they were holding it, and every man had a half of a pub tent, and so two men together put the pub tents together, and they slept in the pub tents. At that time, I was a corporal. I was made a corporal. So they made me corporal of the guard. My job was to change the guard on all their shifts. Now, when my brother, before all this happened, my brother started explaining to me how to shift gears and clutch the car and how to drive it. And when I was a passenger, I used to mimic him with the moves that he made. But he never let me drive. But anyway, so I was corporal of the guard, and they gave me a Jeep. I would go down to the motor pool, and they would have the new guards. They gave me a map of the area and showed me where to show me where the guard posts were. And I would take the new guards and replace relieve the old guards and bring them back. So at every change of shift, I would ask, which one of you guys got a license? And somebody, okay, you're my driver. So we went through all of this, and at the midnight shift, I asked, who's got a license? Nobody. I said, you mean none of you guys know how to drive? No. I said, what am I going to do? I got to get you guys out of here. So I said, okay, pile in. So I took them. And I got behind the wheel, and I remember what my brother Artie showed me, and I went and I managed to get them all changed. After that, I decided I'm going to get a license. So I applied for a license. I went down to the motor pool. There was a lieutenant there, and he had a Jeep there. He took down the information. Okay, get in. Okay, let's go. So I turned it on. And I went down about 50 yards or so. He says, okay, stop. I stopped, and I didn't stall. So he says, now go back up. So I went back to where we started. He says, okay, turn it off. I turned it off. I got out. Here's your license. Just like that. So, after Fort Monmouth, they shipped me to another bad place, Orlando, Florida. Now, if you think there are no hills in Florida, there was a place up there called Pine Castle, right? It's part of Orlando, but it was big hills to get up there. In Pine Castle, that was the bomber base. Orlando Air Base was for the fighter pilots. And, this is when I started to actually do the work that they trained me for. And, I had a shop, and, we had shops, I should say. Now, part of the time that I was there, I didn't have anything to do, so I fooled around with things. And I made this in the shop. This is like a P-38 Lightning, but every piece is from bullets. The bottom was a 4-inch shell. This is a 50 caliber machine gun bullet, and The fuselage were 30 caliber bullets. The flat pieces were part of also that I flattened out and cut to, and I made it. These were cigarette holders were from, I guess it must have been 45s. Just that anyway. But anyway, I had nothing to do, so that's what I made. Now in Orlando, I discovered something. If I go to shul on Friday night, I was usually invited for a Shabbos dinner. And I used to go to Shabbos dinner, and sometimes they had teenage daughters. Nothing happened, but it was always a pleasant experience. Oh, yes, and talk about the hills in to Pine Castle. They used to have old buses that took us to town and brought us back. On the way back, they couldn't make the hills. We all had to get out and walk alongside till they got on level land, and we got back in again. Let's just, all right, I'll try to remember. But, all right, well, I got finished with Orlando, and they shipped me to San Antonio, Texas, to Kelly Field. Now, Kelly Field was more like a country club than it was an army base. They had a golf course there, but at that time I wasn't interested in golf. And they had a big swimming pool with diving boards. And when I was a gymnast, I used to do a lot of diving, the twists and turns and everything. So we knew that we were going to go to a place called Pine Castle, not Pine Castle, Point Clear, Alabama, and we were going to get marine training there because we were going to be put on a ship. We knew that we were going to be assigned to a ship, and after Kelly Field, they shipped us to Point Clear, Alabama. Now this used to be a millionaire's resort. I mean, this was, and it was right, it was like a peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico. And what they did for part of our training. Now, when I was swimming around in Kelly Field, one of my officers saw me swimming. He said, "Yablon, when we get to Point Clear, you're going to be the swimming instructor." So, well, we got there, and they had this tower that you had to jump off. It was, I don't know, about 30 feet high, and we used to exaggerate and called it the 60-foot tower. And but we had to learn, in case we had an abandoned ship, we had to jump. There was a way to jump so you don't get hurt when you hit the water. First of all, you had to look out at the horizon. You don't look down because that would tend to make your torso come down and you wind up with a belly whopper, and that hurts from that height. Also, not to let your arms flail about, grab your shoulders, otherwise you could dislocate a shoulder if you hit with your arms out like this. And then they also told us when we jumped to cross our legs, but that I don't have to explain to you. So, well, we also learned how, now they had lifeboats there with a mast and sails. And they taught us how to rig the mast and put on the sails and how to sail. We were able to sail when we were going with the wind. There was no problem. They showed us how to take it on a tack and go zigzag and go forward little by little, and how to sail. They also had us navigation and making knots and all the other stuff that the sailors learn. From Point Clear, they shipped us to our final destination in the States. It was Berkeley Field in Mobile, Alabama. Now, my outfit, the 6th Aircraft Repair Unit, was formed when we were in Kelly Field, Texas. And there I got to meet all the people who would be my buddies till the end of the war. All right. Now, this is the insignia. Well, you can't tell from this. It was the 6th Aircraft Repair Unit floating. And on the ship, we had a shop to fix every part of an airplane. I won't go into details. It's going to take too long. But our commanding officer, who was a full colonel, and we were only like 350 men. Now, normally 350 men would only get a lieutenant or a captain at most, but we had a full chicken colonel. He was our commanding officer, and they gave him discretionary funds to buy things that he felt we would need. So what he bought was a milk making machine with loads of boxes of dry milk, ice cream making machine, and a soda fountain. And I put this all up in the mess hall. So for dinner, we used to have ice cream sodas. And now, as I say, we had ships below deck, not ships, but shops below deck to repair every part of an airplane. And, and then when we got aboard, we all got bunks, nice, we got, triple-decker bunks, but they were clean, and we got linens, and on the ship beside the shops, they also had a dental office and an infirmary with a doctor, and we had a laundry where we used to give in our dirty clothes and sheets and get them back nice and clean and pressed. And, the showers were tile showers, but they had salt water coming to them. For drinking water, we had desalinization plant, and that for cooking and for drinking and for washing, we had sweet water. We had a barber, and beside the other stuff that we needed for our work, we had just about everything you could want. We left the States from Mobile. Our first stop was at Guantanamo Bay. It wasn't a prison then. It was a supply depot. And we refueled there and got our supplies, and then headed for the Panama Canal. And one night while we were in the locks going up, the locals came down and gave us performance. They put on a show for us. Well, after we finished with the Panama Canal, we went off into the Pacific. And at this time, we were sailing alone. There was no other ships with us. Our armament department and the welders and the machine shop rigged up along the rails. They rigged up machine guns, so we all had a machine gun station. And also, while we, on the way over one day, when the water was nice and calm, the ship stopped, and they rigged up a diving platform halfway down the side of the ship with the landing nets to go up and down. And we used to dive off the platform and swim around in the Pacific. On deck, we had a sharpshooter and a spotter with binoculars, just in case we saw any shark fins. But nothing happened, and everybody was safe, and we continued. Then we decided to have, we were going to have target practice. So what we did for target practice, the ship had a landing deck for 2 helicopters. It was the first time anybody ever saw helicopters. And the helicopters would tow target balloons on with a long rope. And we waited till our gunnery officer said, okay, fire at will, and everybody started shooting, and you could watch. And I could see my tracers were going right at the target, and then the target exploded, and a piece of the rubber balloon got sucked into the air intake of one of the helicopters. So the helicopter spun down, and it's now at the bottom of the ocean, but we managed to save the 2 people aboard. So we shot down our own helicopter. So anyway, we decided to put on a show. We called it the Floating Follies. The carpentry shop built a stage, and we had our floating follies. We had a magician. We had chorus girls, and I was one of the chorus girls. We did the can-can. As I say, we did the can-can. They had one guy was Al Jolson singing "Mommy" in blackface, and he was only lip singing. The record was playing, and he was doing the actions. Then we had the 3 Andrew sisters singing rum and Coca-Cola, and I don't know where they got them, but they had 3 hula skirts, grass skirts, and they were wearing the grass skirts and shaking and singing. After they finished their performance, somebody came out, again, I don't know where they got it, they had a lawnmower. So he started chasing the girls around with the lawnmower. We had a great time, and then we continued on. Our first stop in the Pacific was Aina Wetak. When we got there, the commanding general heard about our show. He asked us to perform for, they had a regular stage for the USO shows because there was a big Army base. So we went to put on the show. Well, they still had a segregated army. In the back were the black soldiers, and the white soldiers were in front. I mean, this is 1943. So, or maybe the beginning of 1942, the beginning of 1943. And while the fellow was doing Al Jolson, a shot rang out and went through the curtains up above our heads. We figured that it wasn't one of the black troop in the back that objected to this, to Al Jolson in blackface. So that was the end of the show. After that, we were always in convoy wherever we went. Our first stop was Palu. Now, the idea was that they wouldn't let us to go in with invasions. They waited until we took over an airstrip, and before they could get any kind of shop set up, we had these amphibious ducks. They were trucks that would go on water and land. We shift gears. They had a screw in the back for when you're in the water. And when you get onto land, we had another shift, and the wheels started to turn. So we used to get damaged goods from the airstrip, fix it, and send it back with these ducks. If they needed something in an emergency, as we had helicopters for. And now anytime Americans go any place, they always find a flat area and they make a baseball field out of it. So we used to work like a regular job, and after work, we'd go into the ducks and go and play baseball. We finished baseball, we'd come back. Now, the ducks were slow moving in the water, so I used to, instead of going with the ducks, I was always wearing a bathing suit because it was hot below decks. That's all I wore was a bathing suit and shoes and socks and a kerchief around my neck. So I was in a bathing suit anyway. I put my shoes into the dock, and I used to swim alongside. We used to be anchored maybe a quarter, half a mile offshore, so it wasn't, and I swim. One day, one of my buddies, I'm working down in the shop, and one of my buddies comes, "Hey, Barney, come on up on deck. I want to show you something." I go up on deck. He says, "Look over." Take a look, and there's sharks swimming all around this ship. And the day before, I was swimming there. So anyway, I got an idea. I says, "Let's go shark fishing." We had spools of cable and everything, so I cut off a big piece of cable, of a steel cable, quarter-inch cable, that was wound, and I opened a part of the cable. I opened the end. I went down to the butcher shop. I asked him if he had any meat hooks, and he'd had. So I put it through, and I spliced the cable together. I did on the other end. I spliced it around the rail of the ship. I got a piece of meat, hooked it on, threw it overboard, and we waited. Didn't wait too long. All of a sudden, bang! So what happened? We pull up the cable, and the hook and meat were gone. They broke the splice. And anyway, so to me, everything was fun and games. Well, like I say, we weren't allowed to go in with the invasions, but we started repairing, and so once they got shops set up ashore, they didn't need us anymore. We went to the next stop. So first we went to Palu, then Peleliu, and then Palawan. Now in Palawan, one of the PT boats tied up alongside us because they had trouble with the homing. The homing, they have the same thing on commercial planes. It's like in a football, and they have the loop so I was the specialist in that. So I went and I fixed it, and then I went out with them on a shakedown cruise to see that it was working. And I had oh boy, those things go. They go like a bullet in the water. But anyway, I was having some fun. Now, after Palawan, we were going to go to Leyte. Now, my brother Peaky, when the war started, he went and volunteered. At that time, all he needed was cannon fodder. So they put him into the infantry. Now he was he took part in 7 invasions in the Pacific, from the first one on Leyte up in the Aleutians to the last one in Okinawa. Now when I knew we were going into Leyte, we had, in our letters, we had a code to let each other know where we were. I knew he was on Leyte. So I went to my chaplain. I said, "I want to meet with my brother when we get there." "Oh, certainly, of course." So he arranged for me to get a phone call through to his outfit. I spoke to the day officer, gave him all the information, and he came back. He says, "It's too late. He's on his way to Okinawa." And so I missed him. And I still, we still kept doing the same thing every place. Then they shipped us to Manila. Now, we were up in Manila, and there they had a tremendous flotilla of ships. We were getting ready for the invasion of Japan. And, we dropped the atomic bomb, and the war ended, and it was VJ Day. Now, they used to give us, once we went overseas, they used to give us rations, a carton of cigarettes and cases of beer. And I just filled up my locker with the cigarettes and the beer, and I broke out the beer on VJ Day, and it was the first time in my life I ever got drunk. And, okay, so the next day we raised the anchor and we steamed up to Tokyo, but they put us in a berth at Yokohama. Now, for 6 months we were in the Army of Occupation. Oh, something very important that I left out. In Manila, they signed the surrender on board the battleship Missouri in Manila Bay. And the guys from my outfit all piled into the ducks, and we were floating all around watching everything that was going on. So we were witnesses to the end of the war. The armistice was signed in Tokyo Bay, and we were there at the time, but it was too far for the ducks to go, so we couldn't watch that. Anyway, we became the Army of Occupation, and they didn't need us anymore for repairing anything, so we became tourists. Now the trains were all running. We've traveled all over Japan, top to bottom, and then my best buddy, another Jewish boy from Philadelphia, Sid Stein, he and I, and then we knew what we'd saved the cigarettes for. We went out. It's called Black Market. We went to the Tokyo station, and we would stuff our jackets with the cigarette cartons and everything, and go out. And as soon as we opened it, you got a bunch of guys. They all want American cigarettes. I mean, this was like gold. So we went and we sold those cigarettes. One time, I had an aviator's wristwatch, but it didn't work. So I went to the one in charge of the instrument shop, who used to be a watchmaker pre-war, and I said, "Could you make this go?" He looks at it. He said, "I can make it go, but it's not going to tell time." So I said, "Oh, okay, I don't care as long as the sweep panel goes." So we went out again to sell it, and I made sure I took my wristwatch off, put this one on. I made sure that they could see it. And then one of the guys points to the wristwatch. How much? So I give him a price, and then somebody else in the audience there, he says, "What time is it?" So I take a look, and I tell them the time, and when I look up, I see they're all taking off their wristwatch and they're resetting the time. But anyway, I sold the wristwatch, and I said, "Sid, let's get out of here." He says, "I'm not finished yet." I said, "You're finished. Let's get the hell out of here." And, that was one of the things. But we saw a lot in Japan. I mean, we took a Jeep up to the slow line of Mount Fujiyama, and that was a beautiful area. They had some gorgeous homes, were never bombed out, and we really enjoyed it. We went to one town, one city where they were filming movies, regular commercial movies, and at the time they were filming like a Ziegfeld Follies thing, and we started flirting with the girls, naturally. But then that was some of the stuff we did when we were in Japan. Then I was getting discharged, and one of the things that we used to, when we were discharged, we would tell them what we want. We discharge after breakfast, so we would tell the chef what we wanted for breakfast, and I ordered steak and eggs, and they made it for us, and then we took off. We were, now this was February of 1946, and we were going from Tokyo to Seattle, Washington. On the way, we ran into a typhoon. And now I had my sea legs, and Sid had his sea legs, and the ship was yawling, whoops. It was yawling from side to side, and I got an idea. I said, "Sid, let's climb the mast." So we climbed the mast, and There were times when we were over the water that if we fell off, we would have never gotten out of there. Till an officer saw us up there, he said, "You get the hell down there." So we came down. Anyway, we wound up in Seattle and waiting to be transported to our discharge area. I was sent back to Fort Dix. While we were in Seattle, one day they were we were passing a hotel. We heard a lot of noise, so we went to look in, and they were having a wedding there. When they saw us in uniform, "Come on in." I mean, in those days, a guy in uniform, we were all heroes, and they all wanted us. Anyway, so I got to Fort Dix, and they discharged me, and then went back to the normal life. Now, at that time, they had a 5220 club. That was unemployment insurance for veterans. It was for 52 weeks, we would get $20 a week. That was the unemployment. But now, when we were in Japan, I met a fella from the neighborhood that I knew. I was never friends before that, but we became like buddies. And after the war, he and I used to go to dances, and we joined a pool club together, and his name was another Pinky. This was Pinky, not Peaky. Pinky Rosenbaum. Anyway, we both went and got off the 5220 club. He went to college, and I took courses in drafting because I said, I'm not going to work with my hands anymore, I'm going to work with my head. So I became a draftsman, and after I graduated from that, I went back on 5220 until I could find a job. Well, I found a job for $15 a week with a plumbing contractor, and I took it. I gave up the $20 a week, and this cost me coffee and everything else, but I wanted to learn, so I took the job. Now, I told you, pre-war I had this girlfriend that we thought would marry. Now, her family really loved me, and her sister especially. She always treated me like a kid brother. She was older, she was married, had a kid herself. And she heard about a job opening for a draftsman. She worked for a plumbing contractor. So she called me up and she says, "Bernie, there's this man, you go see him, he's looking for a draftsman." So, and she gave me his name and number and everything, and I went up, and I came up, I said, "I understand you're looking for a draftsman." He says, "Yes." I said, "My name is Bernie Yablon." Before I could say anything, "Are you Izzy's kid?" I said, Izzy was my father. He said, "Are you Izzy's kid?" I said, "Yes." He says, "You got the job." That was the interview. So anyway, he took me out with him on going to the different. Now, what they did now in Manhattan, any building over 150 feet, which was basically 12 stories, had to have anything that was built had to be fireproof. And all the partitions were made out of masonry blocks and plastered, because they didn't have steel studs at that time for the sheetrock. So basically he was what they called the block partition business, but he was also a general contractor, and he designed showrooms, and showrooms and offices, and mostly in the ladies' garment center. So I would go with him, and we would interview the principals of the different companies, and to see what they wanted, what they needed, and he would leave, and I would start to measure everything up, and measure the rooms and all the doors and windows and everything, and then go back to the office, go to the drawing board, and draw it all out, and started to become a designer of showrooms and offices. Well, this went on, this was the beginning of it. Then he had me when he got the jobs and we had to lay it out, I went up and made the layout with the men. And then I started to order material. And in a couple of years, I was running everything on the outside, and he was staying on the inside. I got to know all the customers. Most of the customers were real estate people, some of the biggest in the city. I mean, like Williams and Company, Helmsley Spear, and Spear and Company.
Excuse me, Bernie. Betty suggested that you wind this up so that people can ask questions.
Okay.
So
So,
finish up.
all right, anyway, after 8 years, the shop steward from the company came to me, and he said, Bernie, he says, I could get the men, I get the best men in the unions, and you know all the customers and you know everything about the jobs, why don't we go partners? So we went partners, and we left our company, and well, I'm going to wind this up. So there's one more thing I want to just say. Last December, I got a call. I said, Bernie, what are your plans for New Year's Eve? I said, so far I haven't got anything. Why? What do you want? She says, well, I want to go out with some friends, and I need an escort. We're going to go to dinner and then go to the Florida Studio Theater. And I said, okay, I'd be happy to take you. So we went, and we found that we hit it off together. A lot of things, she likes to swim, and she likes to dance, and we play bridge, and then, well, also I don't have to tell her how to vote. She knows how to vote. So that's the end of the story. Okay. Oh my God, yeah, there's another very important thing. Last year I decided I wanted to be bar mitzvahed. So I went to Cantor Diane, and I told her, and she says, fine. So she said, well, I'll teach you the cantillations. And she got a date for me for September of last year. September 2011. So I called up my kids. I told them I'm going to be bar mitzvah. It's going to be September. And they said, we can't come. Their kids are all in school. And as a matter of fact, my daughter-in-law is a teacher. She says, we can't come in September. So now my son, my oldest son, Jay, if you've been reading about the colony business, he's the president of the Homeowners Association at the colony. Well, anyway. So Jay was a president for 2 years, a president of the synagogue. So I called him up. I said, Jay, you know people, you know you have pull. Get me a date in August for my bar mitzvah. I said, okay. He came back to me. He says, I got August 20th for you. It just so happened that that's my Hebrew birthday. So I said, fine. So I made arrangements, and I went up. Now, it just by coincidence, my wife was Muriel, and her best friend from when they were children had a granddaughter being married out in Long Island. So I accepted the invitation naturally, and I went out to the wedding. Now that was a week before my bar mitzvah. So it was a rainy, dark night, and I hired a car. I rented a car to go out there. And when I came, and my daughter tried to reach me on my cell phone, but I had it shut off. So she was worried about me because it was a dark, rainy night. And she sat in her foyer waiting for me to get home. I got home about 1 o'clock the next morning, and I was coming up the steps of her front porch, and I tripped on the nosing of the top step, and I went slamming into the house. It knocked me out, and then, well, she heard me moaning, so she looked out the door and she saw me lying there, so right away she called 911. She thought I had a heart attack. And they came, they took me to the hospital and x-rayed me all over. The only thing they found was a little fracture in my cheekbone, but that was nothing. But what did happen, in my neck, I had crushed one of the discs. But at that time, we didn't know it after they took the x-rays. And I told my doctor, originally he sent me home and had arranged for a physical and occupational therapist. And I said, this is no good because I need a neurologist. I can't feel my fingers and I can't walk straight. For my bar mitzvah, my daughter was so worried because I was off balance. She was afraid of going up and down in the bima that I was going to fall. But anyway, I managed. It went off fine. Everybody was very pleased with it. And then when I told the doctor I need a neurologist, he sent me to a neurologist who sent me for MRI. The next morning he calls me up, he says, check yourself into Sarasota Memorial. So I went to Sarasota Memorial, and I met a surgeon. Just so happens is Barbara's son-in-law. You know, what? Anyway, so he operated on me. He took out the damaged disc, and he put in a steel plate screwed into the two vertebrae that it spanned. So now I can't lose my head, it's screwed on. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Anyone has any questions? Go ahead.
I got lost with the girlfriend, and then you have a wife. Are they one and the same, or you met somebody else?
Oh, no. The girlfriend was pre-war, and we never got married.
She married someone else, right?
What?
Didn't you tell me she married someone else?
Oh, yeah, she married somebody else while I was in the... Well, now, I talk about my friend Peaky Rosenbaum. One day, I was walking on Tremont Avenue. I was going west, and he was walking down with a girl going east. So, you know, and we, hi, Pinky, hi, Bernie. I said, who's the girl you're with? So he introduced, this is Muriel. I said, what's her phone number? He said, hey, Bernie, come on now. I said, what are you worried about, Pinky? You're going back to college next week. You think she's going to wait for you in Pine? So, so I said, where are you going? He said, we're going to the Tremont Terrace. That was a dance hall. So I said, oh, that's okay. I'll meet you there. I'll see you there later. So I went home, and I changed into a suit. And my sister was there. She says, Bernie, where are you going? I said, I'm going to meet my wife. And then I went to the dance hall, and I was dancing with Muriel. I kept dancing with her till she says, Bernie, you better find somebody else to dance with because I could see the steam coming out of Pinky's ears. So I would dance with someone else. I made a date with her. And after that, we never saw anybody else again. We got married in 1948. And 6 months later, I bought a two-family house in Flushing. And I converted to a three-family. And then there's more to tell, but it's too late. Oh, that was a bar mitzvah. That was my granddaughter's bar mitzvah. And that's every one of my family. That's all my children and all my grandchildren. Okay, anybody else? Now, this This, well, Muriel, in 2003, we were on our way to a restaurant, and all of a sudden she screamed. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I got a big pain in my back." I said, "Okay, we're going to the hospital." She says, "No, let's go home. I'll rest, and I'll get better." And so I took her home, and she lay down. And then a little while later, she said, "Bernie, you better call 911." So I called 911, and they took her to, well, originally I told them take her to Doctor's Hospital because that's where our insurance covers us. And I went to Doctor's Hospital, and they said she went to Sarasota Memorial. So when I heard that, I said, "Oh, it's no good. I know it's a heart hospital." And I went over there, and in a little while she was gone. So, oh, we were married 54 years, and, well, we had good times and bad times, but we stayed together, and we were happy together.
So when Bernie starts to eat too much, I said, "What would Muriel say?"
Oh,
You know,
yes. She was a nutritionist. She was very much into alternative medicine. Now, in New York...
We can't go into any
okay.
further than that. I just made that comment. I want you to go into that whole thing. All right. Well, thank you, Bernie. Thank you very much for entertaining us with your stories.